reasons, as Jeff pointed out today. It was you, about the fact that I did a short postdoc in New Mexico. People had just learned how to culture malaria, and I was already sort of a malariologist. And I wanted to learn more about enzymes, and I'd come to Brandeis to work with Bob Abels. So I was a postdoc when this young first-year rotating graduate student showed up in our lab. And it was Dan. And I've never seen that level of combination of intensity and interest in what everybody was doing, including me. And I really was not a chemist and mechanistic person at that point. I was definitely a biologist. I used to get chickens in the lab and get oviducts out of them and look at glycosylation enzymes and so on. But Dan would take intense interest in what we were doing, and he would listen. And we had some ideas about what I wanted to do later on, and he was very supportive. Dan also spilled a lot of radioactivity while he was doing in the lab, and people still talk about that. And in Abel's lab, we didn't really think very much. We kind of had rough ideas of what we wanted to do, and the spirit was just start doing the experiments, and the experiments will tell you what you need to do next. And I think Dan needed a little more structure, and I think he went on to the Jane's lab, and that's worked out well for everybody in this room. But professionally, I want to quickly move on to how much he was a supporter of people. The things we heard all day long today from all of you were true even then. He listened to other people's interests, and he took a lot of the role of encouraging people to do things and not be afraid and so on. And I very much remember that. And subsequently, after I left Brandeis, I only had one job interview, and Dan and others helped me prepare for my interview. I got the job. It was a small university on the East Coast, and very quickly Dan got me involved in other things beyond that university, which I needed. He invited me to Boulder when he was in Tom Check's lab to spend some time there and get to know what they were doing. When I got my first chance to do a sabbatical, he invited me here to Stanford. Got to make friends with Bob and others in the department who were all very supportive. It changed my career. We started doing things with Pat Brown and microarrays in malaria, a lot of the first of the genomics things in malaria, and led to the job that I currently have at the University of Washington. And I cannot underestimate all the things that Dan helped do in those processes. And even now, last night, after all of you left, even Peg went to bed. Dan and I were staying up late. He was giving me grief about why it's taking so long to get this done and that done. So he does continue to push me, and I respond to that, and I really appreciate that. I also want to say a few things that are personal. I think around that time when we met at Brandeis, both he and Peg had come to Boston. And now you're going to hear a lot more about Peg along with Dan. It's been a very special friendship. They included me in many, many things that they did. My dad passed away, and my mother came to live with me, who was not only a little bit older, but had some other challenges, mental health and so on. She went on to stay with us for a long time, but in those days it was all new. I went from a 25, 28-year-old single guy living by himself, then suddenly having a mom. But they included us in everything we did. And I started going to their houses, and Mama P would be invited along with all the postdocs and graduate students. It turned out to be a very graceful way for us to adjust to the new way we were living. And just to capture one particular story, we were invited for a Christmas party at Dan and Peg's house, again full of graduate students and postdocs. And my mother looked at the Christmas tree and said, "These people are very poor." I have to explain. This was not a Christmas tree. This was a branch with no leaves on it. And it had sticks sticking out in different directions, decorated with ribbons and some presents on it. And I had to explain to my mother that, no, they don't believe in cutting live trees, and so they do all these unusual things, and she sort of just stared at me like. So you've all seen different versions of Dan, in fact, being very idealistic, having very extreme views about what's good and what's not. And we've all learned to adjust, and I think even if we do a fraction of what they recommend, it turns out very well. I could keep going, and I think there are many, many wonderful things to say. Thank you both. And then now our children have become good friends. My daughter Sarah was 1 year old when we came and lived here on our sabbatical. And Anna was born while we were here. And now it's great to see them all grown up and they've become good friends. And Sarah lives here in San Francisco, so I get to see them, in fact, and Sarah, and Anna, and Sam. And so it's been a great friendship. I know there are many others who have wonderful things to say, but I will finish by saying thank you both for your professional and personal friendship.
That Dan is a brilliant scientist. No argument. But something that I haven't heard mentioned yet, maybe it will be later, is that Dan is a very dedicated but also a very demanding teacher. Let me give you one example of that. When Dan was recruited to the biochemistry department at Stanford, he was given the usual condition, namely that he can take 1 or 2 years without teaching to get his research program underway. Well, when Dan came to the department, within a relatively short time, it occurred to him, it became obvious to him, I should say, that the current crop of graduate students were really not very sophisticated in chemical mechanisms, either enzymatic or not enzymatic. And Dan said, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm going to give a course for those graduate students who want to become knowledgeable about enzymatic chemical mechanisms. And he gave that course in the evening. It was well attended initially. The attendance dropped off, but nevertheless, a few hearty souls and actually learned a great deal, for which I've been told they were very, very grateful to Dan. It was a really wonderful thing to do. I wonder how many of us here would do that if we don't have to teach. To undertake this activity just on our own. So there's no question about it. As I said, Dan was and is now a dedicated but demanding teacher. And that should be factored in to what he has accomplished. Now, there's another thing, another point about Dan that I'd like to bring to your attention, and that is that, as you know, graduate students are often unhappy about one thing or another. And Dan would listen to them, and often they had valid points that needed to be brought to the attention of the faculty at one of the faculty's faculty meetings. And so he became sort of a departmental ombudsman, an informal ombudsman for the students. Students would come to him. They realized they had an ear that was willing to accept their complaints, often valid. Dan would take these to the faculty meetings, and on some occasions action was taken. Not always, but it's again emphasized to me how interesting and how important Dan was, how interested and important Dan felt student education at all levels was important, was necessary. So, what's there more to say? He's trained a whole bunch, a slew of first-rate students who've gone on to take excellent positions. I've been talking with several of you here in academia, some, a few, less actually, have gone into industry. So I think that it's safe to say that Dan's have been able to combine training, teaching, with research for knowledge and so on in a way that is really quite unique. And actually the best example of the best testament, I could say, to the feelings about all of you here, many of you students, postdocs, who came from abroad, the East Coast and so on, to honor Dan in his 60th birthday. So I personally wish you the very happiest birthday, Dan. You're a great guy.
All right, so those of you I haven't met, I'm Aki Lombeck. Let me first say that, in April, I called Dan up to congratulate him about finally getting into the National Academy of Sciences. I told him that now he was no longer a young outsider rebel, but now firmly a member of the scientific establishment. And then Dan said to me, "Oh, this means I'm getting old." And I said to him, "Not until October." So, well, Dan, now it's October and you're old. So, I first got to know Dan when he arrived. I think I'd met him once before, but when he arrived in Boulder as a beginning postdoc in Tom Cech's lab. And this was at a miraculous time in Boulder when not only Dan arrived, but many other very good postdocs arrived in Boulder. And at the same time, Tom Cech's life had many more demands on it. And so Dan was suddenly in this position of being one of many and not really having the attention of the advisor. And at the same time, I had arrived in Boulder a few years earlier to be head of biochemistry division, and that had many responsibilities, which I didn't want to do. And so my main way around this was to roam the hallways, finding people to talk about science, because I rationalized if I was talking about science, then it was okay, and I didn't have to do the things that I really should do. So, of course, you all know that Dan likes to talk. So kind of we gravitated together during that time and spent many hours conversing about what the big problems were in the RNA field that Dan wanted to know, because he clearly intended to solve all of them. And I was thrilled because Dan had a very noticeable, very, let's say, careful approach to doing science. So the rigor was very clear there already. So you could see that this was an unusual person. So there's a lot of fun to talk to, I thought at that time. Not to say that he didn't think a lot of the stuff we were doing was wrong. And it was surprising he didn't hesitate to tell me. So this started, which has now been more than 30 years of conversations where Dan and I meet up at some meeting or another and go take a walk and have a conversation, or I've come out here and we've had conversations over the telephone, and so, 35 years of kind of talking about science and many other topics. So I really appreciate that. We really had in common this kind of interest in describing, in my case, the kinetics and thermodynamics of RNA folding and RNA protein interactions, which is one of the many things that they thought he could conquer in his lifetime. So I think felt that really this was, for me, a very nice experience as both a colleague and a friend. So I didn't, the main additional thing that I really wanted to say about this is that, so thank you for the 35 years, and that I really enjoyed this meeting. What I saw here was, the output of what he accomplished, and I don't know all of you, I'm sorry to say, but I did get to know many of Dan's students. And I think all of you probably do have a sense of this, but you're very lucky to have been brought up kind of right. Because this is not that common. And so I think I would like to, if I have a water glass, toast Dan as simply now venerable scientist. So to Professor Dan Herschlag.
All right. Well, I've been thinking about what I was going to say. I decided I shouldn't try to be humorous because when it comes to Dan and I, the joke is somehow always on me. And the other thing is that I'm sure that actually he should be a little bit worried about what we're going to say, but actually you're all worried about how he's going to respond to it. That's Dan. But so I'm one of the, I guess, 2 people here that shared the postdoc years with Dan. So Bruce is the other. And so I arrived in Boulder in 1989, and it was Dan and Peg that actually put me up for the first few days when I arrived. Dan basically came to the lab, to Tom's lab. Tom was interested in really trying to understand the mechanism of group 1 oncatalysis. And he had been there about 8 months when I got there. I had experience in organic chemistry. Dan, of course, had this prolific PhD career where he published lots of papers, very rigorous, in-depth papers on sort of monophosphate ester hydrolysis. And this translated nicely into trying to understand how group 1 intron catalyzes the chemistry. I'm not sure if he worked that much with enzymes as a grad student, but he certainly thought deeply about them. And so, he brought this level of rigor, and I'm sure you're used to him analyzing your data or criticizing your data, telling you what you should do next and how you should do it. Okay? You're probably wondering, well, what was he like as a postdoc? And in Tom's lab, he was criticizing everyone's data, and, how they should do their experiments, and what they should do. And actually, Dan and I used to go to Aki's group meetings as well, so he was doing the same thing to Aki. So he was kind of the mentor around Boulder. But it came up today. I think Dan, one of the Dans, mentioned that his academic honesty. So that's kind of where sort of I appreciate Dan. He's a very honest person intellectually, and he will sort of tell you what he thinks, and that's something that I've always, come to value. And sort of just, let me give you a few anecdotes about this. And one is, he once said that organic chemists make really bad entomologists. So, you may be right about that. Another example is, we had a visiting prospective come into Boulder who was interested in, prospective postdoc, who was interested in, actually Dan asked this person what they wanted to do in Tom's lab, and this person said, I want to crystallize the group 1 intron and determine three-dimensional structure. And Dan's response was, what do you want to do that for? You're not going to learn anything from structure. And that person, you may have heard of her. Her name is Jennifer Dowd. But the mark of a true scholar is the fact that you can see the other perspective. And I did see structures up there today, and I think Dan does appreciate that structure can bring some value, at least he's come around. So one other anecdote, which sort of is a testament to Dan's, I guess, sense of humor and his memory. So Peg and Dan were going to go on vacation, and they did go on vacation. They asked me to...
What?
I heard a couple of times today.
I heard ya.
He's asking students to paint the fence, and he's clean my car or whatever, clean my apartment while they're gone. And so they wanted me to go to the apartment and A, feed the guinea pig, and B, water the Norfolk Island pine. And I was kind of an anxious person, and so I distinctly remember Peg saying, don't give the pine too much water. So I went a little bit the wrong direction. I fed the guinea pig, but by the time they got back,
It was dead.
no, it wasn't looking too good. Which is fine, I felt bad about it, but But the interesting thing is, the reason I bring it up here is that it was at his birthday party. It was about a year later. We're at his house. We're all having a good time. We're 2 hours into the party. And he goes into another room and he comes out with this little pot with soil in it. And there's this stub sticking out. And it's the Norfolk Island pine that he reminded me I killed. Maybe it was the Christmas tree, I don't know. So anyway, when I left Boulder, though, I did give them a new plant. Well, when they left Boulder, they left before I left. Anyway, so that's all fun. But what I did want to say, and I think people in some ways appreciate this, but maybe not fully, because not many. I didn't hear anything about ribozymes today. I heard a little bit about RNA, gratifyingly, but nothing about ribozymes. And that's because there aren't that many that have been discovered. It's a limited field. There aren't that many papers. But Aki talked about the level of rigor that Dan brought to Boulder, and it caught on sooner or later, pretty quickly there. His papers are classic in the field. But actually, what that did, it took a little while for the rest of the world to catch on. But his work sort of transcended Boulder, and it really transformed the field of sort of ribosymology. And that's sort of probably lost on a lot of you. It's not lost on me. And certainly in the, after he left Boulder and in those 15 years, and there are lots of ribozymes papers, especially the endonucleolytic ribozymes, the level and quality of those papers got better and better. And to me, I read those and I see Dan Herschlag in those papers. So he really set the tone for that level of rigor. And anyway, that's all fun. I fondly remember lots of our discussions as postdocs, RNA. We would have one-on-one basketball games. You would always beat me, but that was okay. And I also remember, going to the pub occasionally, having a beer and watching the Celtics. But that was the start of a friendship that's lasted 30 years and something I've really valued and looking forward to another 30 years.